Alyssa Moreno never believed in the strange whispers about the old tenement on Delancey Street. To her, New York was a city of opportunity, not superstition. But on her first night inside apartment 6B, she swore she saw someone watching her from the window across the Aaliyah figure with her own face, standing perfectly still in the dark. Miles Carter, the neighbor who had lived in the building far longer, had once warned new tenants never to stare into the opposite windows after midnight. Alyssa didn't listen, and by the time she realized why, it was already too late. The building had noticed her. The city was louder than anything I had ever known. Yet when I closed the door of my new apartment, it felt like stepping into a tomb. The sound of honking horns, distant sirens, and the chatter of people outside faded into a hollow stillness that made me uneasy. I had told myself this was just another old New York building with its quirks, but something about the silence pressed in on me. The walls were thin, the paint was cracked, and the floor creaked with every step. But behind all that, there was a sense that the air was heavy with things I could not see. The place had been cheap, suspiciously so, and that should have been my first warning. In New York, nothing came cheap without a reason. The landlord hardly looked at me when I signed the lease, sliding the key across the table as if he wanted the transaction done as quickly as possible. His eyes never met mine, and I noticed how his hands trembled slightly, like he was eager to wash them of responsibility. I laughed it off back then, but alone in the dark, the memory kept resurfacing. The window of my apartment looked out into a narrow alley. The brick walls were so close I could almost reach across and touch the other building, if the glass weren't in the way. At night, I would stare out and see dozens of windows like mine stacked on top of each other, most of them lifeless black squares, but there was one that refused to blend in. On the 5th floor across from me, a dim glow pulsed through the curtain. Not the steady light of a lamp or the cold shine of a television. It flickered, erratic, like a candle flame struggling to stay alive. In a city filled with artificial brightness, it felt strangely out of place, like a secret trying to announce itself. I watched too long on my second night. The curtain twitched, and for the briefest second I thought I saw something pressed against the glass. A pale oval, a face perhaps, though it was too far and too shadowed to be sure. The image burned into me before vanishing, leaving the window once again a dull square of light. I told myself it was nothing. People live however they want here. Maybe it was just someone lighting incense or playing with shadows. But when I turned away from the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been there was still staring back at me. That night I woke with a jolt, the digital clock blinking 3:00 a.m. The silence was gone, replaced by a faint sound that set every nerve in my body on edge. Tap, tap, tap at first. I thought it was coming from the pipes or a neighbor's wall, but it was too close, too deliberate. I held my breath and realized the sound was coming from my window. The glass trembled softly as though someone's finger was tapping from the outside, testing its strength, seeing if it would break. I didn't want to look, but not looking felt worse. Slowly I turned my head toward the window, my heart slamming against my chest. Across the alley, the strange glowing window was wide open now, the curtain swaying back and forth. The tapping at my own glass stopped the moment my eyes landed on it, as if whoever was out there knew they had my attention. I wanted to believe the curtain moved because of a draft, but the air was completely still. The leaves of the dead plant on my sill didn't stir. My own breath felt too loud in that crushing quiet. I pulled the blanket tighter around me and shut my eyes, forcing myself to believe that when I opened them again, everything would be normal. But as the minutes crawled past, I couldn't escape the image burned into my brain, the thought that in the window across the alley there was someone standing very still, waiting for me to look again. And when I finally dared to peek, the glow had vanished completely, leaving only a black square of glass staring back at me like an open mouth. I should have felt relief. Instead, the silence that followed felt worse than the tapping. It felt like a promise that whatever had been there wasn't gone at all. It had simply moved closer, and that was when I heard it again. Faint but unmistakable breathing, not mine. Slow, steady, and far too close. The morning after felt heavier than it should have. The city roared outside as usual, but the air inside my apartment was stale, thick, almost damp, as though the walls themselves had been sweating through the night. I tried to convince myself that what happened was a dream, a trick of exhaustion, but deep down I knew I had been awake. The memory of the tapping, of that pale shape across the alley, clung to me no matter how much coffee I drank. When I left for work, I noticed something I hadn't before. The hallway leading out of my apartment was dim, the single bulb above flickering weakly. The wallpaper was peeling, curling at the edges, exposing the plaster beneath. I had walked past it the day I moved in without a second thought, but now I noticed marks underneath, faint scratches. I leaned in closer, heart racing. They weren't random. The scratches ran in jagged lines, almost like someone had dragged their nails down the wall again and again. But as I traced them with my eyes, I realized they weren't just scratches. They looked like letters. I couldn't make sense of them, but there was a pattern, a shape, a language half buried beneath layers of plaster. I backed away quickly, telling myself it was graffiti from years ago, just vandalism covered up badly. Yet something about the way the grooves cut deep into the wall made me doubt they had been made by anything ordinary. That night I lay in bed, determined not to give in to fear. The glow across the alley was gone, and I told myself I should feel relieved, but the silence pressed harder than before. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the old radiator made me tense, waiting for the sound I dreaded. It came sooner than I expected. Soft, deliberate footsteps. They moved slowly across the ceiling above me. My apartment was on the top floor. There should have been nothing but roof above my head. Yet the steps dragged on, circling, pausing, and continuing again. I clutched the blankets so tight my knuckles ached. The sound grew clearer, heavier, until it stopped right above me. I didn't dare breathe. For a long moment, the silence stretched thin, threatening to snap, and then I felt it, the faint shift of air, a weight in the room that hadn't been there before, the sensation of someone watching. My skin prickled, every nerve alert to something I couldn't see. I reached slowly for my phone, desperate for light. The glow of the screen comforted me for only a second, until I saw what was reflected back. My phone's camera caught something my eyes couldn't. In the reflection, at the far corner of the room, there was a figure, tall, unmoving, its face hidden in shadow. My throat closed as I turned my head toward the corner in real life, but it was empty, nothing there. The reflection, however, didn't lie. The figure remained, standing silently, watching me. My hand trembled so violently that the phone slipped and clattered to the floor, the screen going black. The room plunged into darkness again, leaving me with the terrifying knowledge that something was still there, something only the reflection could reveal. I didn't move for the rest of the night. My body ached from lying so rigid, my eyes wide and unblinking, staring into the shadows that seemed thicker than ever. I listened to the silence until my ears rang, straining for the sound of footsteps or breathing. When the sun finally rose, I sat up and glanced at the corner again. Empty, always empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment I stopped watching, something would shift closer each time, waiting for the chance to finally step into the light. And as I dragged myself out of bed, exhausted and trembling, I noticed something new. The wallpaper in my room had started to peel too. The faint outlines of scratches were surfacing, the same jagged marks I'd seen in the hallway, only this time they were on the wall directly behind where I slept. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that the marks on the wall were just cracks, that the figure in the reflection was a trick of tired eyes. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more the building seemed to push back. Every night was worse than the one before, and every morning I woke up weaker, like the place was feeding on me. My body moved through the motions of daily life, getting dressed, stepping out into the noisy New York streets, pretending everything was normal. But the moment I came back, the air shifted. It felt like stepping out of the real world and into something that only looked like an apartment. One evening, after forcing myself to stay out late, I returned to find the front door of the building unlocked. Normally it was bolted shut after dark, but that night it swung open at the lightest push. Inside, the stairwell was darker than usual. The bulb above sputtered weakly before dying altogether, leaving only the faint light from the street seeping in behind me. The silence in that moment was suffocating. Even the constant hum of the city seemed to have been swallowed. I forced myself up the stairs, gripping the railing with clammy hands. Halfway to my floor, I slowed. The wallpaper had peeled more since the morning, long strips curling off the walls. Beneath them, the scratches were clearer now, not random, not meaningless. They formed crooked letters, crude but unmistakable. The word was jagged, as if carved in desperation. Stay. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't tell if the word was meant for me or for someone else who had lived here before. Either way, it sent a chill through my bones. I hurried up the rest of the stairs, each creak of wood echoing like a gunshot in the silence. When I reached my floor, my stomach dropped. My apartment door was ajar. I had locked it, I was sure of it, but now it hung open, dark inside, like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I wanted to run back down the stairs, but something stronger pulled me forward. Like the building itself wouldn't let me leave until I stepped inside. The air in the apartment was colder than outside, damped with the smell of soil and mildew. My shoes crunched on something, and when I looked down, my breath froze. Glass. My window had shattered inward. Shards scattered across the floor in glittering fragments. My chest tightened as I scanned the room. Nothing seemed disturbed except the glass, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here, maybe still was. I crouched low, staring at the shards. At first they looked random, jagged pieces of broken glass. But as I focused, a horrifying pattern emerged. The shards weren't scattered by chance. They had fallen into the shape of a hand, palm open, fingers spread wide as if reaching toward me. My throat closed and I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I thought my chest might crack. The window across the alley caught my attention then. For the first time in days, it was dark. The curtain that had swayed restlessly before was now ripped down completely, leaving the glass bare. I squinted into the emptiness, searching for any sign of life. Nothing, just a black void staring back at me. But the silence around me deepened, as though the whole building was holding its breath. My eyes flicked back to the shards on the floor. The shape of the hand was still there, but now, as the light from the street lamp shifted through the broken glass, it seemed to glisten, almost pulsing. I couldn't stand it any longer. I shoved the pieces aside, ignoring the sting as tiny slivers cut into my palm. I stumbled into the bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against it, trying to convince myself I was still safe. But the cold in the room deepened, the air heavy, suffocating, and I realized something terrible. The silence wasn't empty, it was listening. I stopped pretending I was in control after that night. The apartment no longer felt like a place I lived in, it felt like a trap, a cage that grew tighter every time I tried to leave. Even in daylight, I could sense it. The walls seemed to breathe when I wasn't looking. The air was thick with a damp chill that clung to my clothes, and the corners of every room held shadows that never fully receded, no matter how bright the sun was outside. I started to wonder if the city beyond the window was even real anymore, or if it was only there to trick me into thinking escape was possible. One morning I found something that shattered what little strength I had left. A slip of paper had been pushed under my door. My name wasn't on it, no return address, nothing that made it feel like it belonged to the world outside. In shaky handwriting, smeared with something dark, it said only 4 words, "You can't leave here." My fingers trembled as I read it, the paper damp with sweat by the time I dropped it. It wasn't the warning that broke me, it was the certainty. Whoever or whatever left it wasn't trying to scare me, it was telling me the truth. Still, I tried. I threw my few belongings into bags, my mind set on forcing my way out. I didn't care if I had to run through the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back. The building would not keep me. But when I reached the lobby, dragging the bags behind me, I froze. The exit door was there, plain and ordinary, but when I grabbed the handle and twisted, nothing happened. It didn't rattle, didn't budge. It was like pulling on a painted outline, a door that was no longer real. My chest tightened, panic rushing up my throat. I kicked it, slammed my fists against it, screamed until my voice cracked. Nothing. The silence afterward was worse than the door refusing me. The building seemed to hum faintly, like it was pleased. I turned, desperate, but the hallway that led back to the stairs no longer looked the same. It stretched unnaturally long, fading into a darkness that made my stomach lurch. My breath came fast, uneven, and I forced myself forward, my footsteps echoing in that endless corridor. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. The wallpaper rippled as I passed, the peeling edges lifting as though something inside the walls pressed against them, struggling to get out. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare look too closely, afraid of what would push its way through. The hall twisted, bent, and by the time I stumbled up the stairs, gasping, I wasn't sure if I had taken a wrong turn or if the building had rearranged itself just to keep me lost. When I finally found my apartment door again, I nearly collapsed from relief. I pushed it open without thinking, desperate just to be inside, but froze as soon as I stepped through. My suitcases were already there, unpacked, my clothes folded neatly back into the drawers, my toothbrush on the sink, my shoes lined against the wall. Everything I had packed and dragged downstairs was back in its place, as if I had never touched it. The sight made bile rise in my throat. The apartment wasn't just keeping me inside. It was resetting itself around me, remaking my life before my eyes, undoing any attempt to leave. I staggered into the bedroom, heart hammering, and that was when I saw it. On the bed, perfectly centered, lay a photograph. The paper was curled at the edges, the image slightly grainy, but the subject was unmistakable. It was me, lying in bed, fast asleep. The picture had been taken from inside the room, from the very corner where I had seen the shadow in my phone's reflection. I dropped the photo and backed away, my chest heaving. The walls seemed closer now, the air colder, as if the apartment was tightening its grip on me. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat, and the silence around me seemed to lean in, listening, waiting for me to break. The days that followed slipped into one another until I could no longer tell if it was Monday or Friday, morning or night. My phone had stopped working, the screen glitching whenever I tried to call or take a photo. Every time I opened the camera it showed me the same thing, myself, standing in the far corner of the room, staring back with hollow eyes. Even when I pointed the lens at the ceiling, the floor, or my own face, the figure in the corner was always there, still and patient, like it knew I couldn't escape it. The city outside my windows seemed to grow more distant each day. The traffic, once a constant backdrop, became faint, muffled, like someone had placed a wall of glass between me and the rest of New York. When I opened the window to breathe in the air, there was nothing. No horns, no voices, not even the smell of smoke or food carts drifting upward. It was like the world beyond the alley had been drained away, leaving only the building and me inside it. I stopped trying to eat. Hunger came and went, but the thought of food made my stomach twist. Instead, I listened. At first it was only the dragging footsteps that haunted me, slow and deliberate across the ceiling. Then came the tapping on the glass again, soft but insistent, as though a hand were testing, waiting for the moment it would finally break through. I pressed my back against the wall and stared at the window for hours, too afraid to blink. The moment I closed my eyes, the sound always returned, closer, sharper, like nails against the glass. At night, the breathing grew louder. It no longer stayed in the corner or the ceiling. It moved. I would hear it at the door, then near the dresser, then right beside the bed. The cold of it brushed my cheek like the faintest breeze. My skin would rise with goosebumps and I would clench my teeth to keep from gasping, afraid that the sound of fear would invite it closer. Sometimes I swore I felt fingers graze my arm, light as cobwebs. I stopped sleeping altogether. One night, everything changed. I woke to find the broken window fully intact, smooth and flawless as though it had never shattered at all. For a moment I thought I had gone insane, that my memories were only hallucinations. But then I saw at the opposite window across the alley glowing faintly once more. No curtain this time, no flickering light, just a steady, unnatural glow that made my stomach tighten. I crept closer, the glass cold under my fingertips. My breath fogged the surface as I peered across. The room on the other side was no stranger's. It was mine. The same peeling wallpaper, the same crooked radiator, the same sagging bed, a perfect mirror image of my apartment staring back at me. And in its window stood a figure. It was me, not just a reflection, not a trick of light. It was me, my own face, pale and hollow, staring back with eyes too dark, too empty. I staggered backward, but the figure didn't move. It only watched, unblinking, as though it had been waiting for me to finally notice it. My chest tightened as I realized something even worse. Behind that version of me, the room was not empty. Shadows crawled across the walls, slow and deliberate, moving like living things. They pressed close to the other me, circling, surrounding, as though they had already claimed it. I turned away, desperate to escape, but when my eyes caught the mirror on the wall, my blood froze. My reflection was gone. The glass showed the room behind me, the bed, the dresser, the peeling wallpaper, but not me. I wasn't there. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body trembling, when I heard it at last. A voice, soft and low, curling into my ear from just behind me. It was my own voice, whispering words I had already seen scratched into the walls, words I had tried to deny but could never escape. Stay. The sound sank into me, heavy and final, as though the building itself had spoken through my mouth. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't trapped inside the apartment. The apartment was inside me, and it wasn't going to let either of us leave.